we call it as the sick sinus. The sinus itself is sick. Whereas here what you had is there are P waves which imply that the sinus is active, but the impulse, the electrical impulse does not go from the upper to the lower segment of the heart, and it's the lower segment which when pumps blood, it goes to the systemic circulation. So these are the two scenarios in which pacemakers are generally required. So as I said, they can be useful in symptomatic bradycardias or in AV blocks. Now these symptomatic bradycardia could be when the sinus node is actually diseased. And AV block is when there is a conduction abnormal. So how we can do a pacemaker is we can do a temporary pacing or we can do a permanent pacing. So this can be done by placing on the chest wall. If we place pads and then we electrically give it a current, then it will stimulate, and that will be an external pacemaker. Sometimes, or rather more frequently, or rather almost always, these external pads are used only for a couple of minutes. But what we do is we insert a transvenous pacing lead via either the leg vein, what we call as the femoral vein, or the neck vein, what we call as the internal jugular vein. And so we do a temporary pacing. Now temporary pacing is we put a lead, take it to the heart, and there is a pulse generator which is kept outside, which is then stimulating the heart. But as you can understand, it cannot be done for a long time. So normally we will use a transvenous pacing, which is for temporary pacing for a couple of days, and then decide whether it is a transient AV block, which is due to some drugs or something, in which permanent pacemaker is not required, or whether a permanent pacemaker is required. So this is what I shared with you. We can put pads and we can apply by an external pulse generator energy to these. And this is what a transvenous temporary pacemaker looks like. It has these switches which tell you the rate that at which we can have to pace the heart. Normally we do it at 70 or 80 beats per minute. It gives the output, actually how much current we have to give, and it has this sensing function which enables this even a very elementary temporary pacemaker device also to sense the patient's own beat. So it will not fire when the patient's own beat is there, when the patient's own contraction is there. And this is what a pacemaker, a single chamber pacemaker looks like. This is where we implant it, and it has a pulse generator, and then there is a wire which goes to the heart, which we thread through the vein into the heart, and then we try to position it anywhere in the right ventricle. As I said, this is the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle. And as I showed you, when the atria contract but the conduction doesn't happen to the ventricles, it's of no use. So we have to stimulate the ventricle. But when we stimulate the ventricle, the atrial kick to the filling of the ventricle is lost. So that is some sort of a limitation to this device. This is what it's a mannequin actually, which we are showing you. But sometimes we have to place the two pacing leads on the left side, one in the front and one in the back, and then it stimulates the heart. And if your patient hits the emergency, has a very slow heart rate, and you have to take the patient to a fluoroscopic guided temporary pacing, to buy that time, because person may not die in that short time, we put a external pacemaker. Historically, the journey has not been very long. The first actually pacemaker was put in 1958, and it failed actually within 3 hours. And the second device was then implanted, which lasted for 2 days. And so the whole journey of actually development of this technology, which I would say is a gift from the biomedical engineers to the world, to the mankind. And the doctors only implant it, but it's these great inventions which save lakhs and lakhs of lives. This is actually a cardiologist, Dr. Zoll, very famous man. We have Zoll actually defibrillators also on his name. A very respected man in Boston who actually created first pacemaker using the modern transistors. But it was large, it was heavy, obviously, and over a period of time, it has really got miniaturized very significantly. I'll show you some of the advancements which medically have happened, but they have all happened because of the contributions from the biomedical engineered so. So as I said, if we pace only the atrium or the ventricle, it is called as a single chamber pacemaker. If we will pace the ventricle, you can understand the atria pump blood into the ventricle and then the ventricle pushes it to the whole of the body. That atrial kick will be lost. So after a couple of years of development of single chamber pacemakers, within 5 to 10 years, a syndrome was recognized which is called as pacemaker syndrome. In this patient's cardiac outputs, that is the amount of blood the heart pumps to the whole of the body, was not adequate. And so it was quickly realized that we need to develop dual chamber pacemakers. Now, dual chamber pacemaker is virtually like a normal pacemaker, in which the atria, two leads are put, one into the atrium, one into the ventricle. The pulse generator remains the same. It first stimulates the atrium and then stimulates the ventricle. So it's like the normal heart. The atrium contracts first and then in diastole, then in the systole is contraction of the heart, the blood is pumped to the whole of the body. This is a new development actually in which multiple chambers. Again, we later realized that when we were pacing the atria and the ventricle, we had solved a huge problem. But see, normally the conduction system is it stimulates the heart and the right and the left ventricle are both contracting simultaneously. But if you are stimulating one chamber, the other chamber will actually contract later as the pulse reaches there. So over 5 to 10 years, again, the heart pumping would decrease. And so these biventricular pacemakers were designed in which there are now 3 leads. One, it paces the right atrium. Second, paces the right ventricle. And the third, through the coronary sinus, we go to the left ventricle and we pace the left ventricle also. So we are pacing the right ventricle and the left ventricle both. So you can have a single chamber pacemaker, you can have a dual chamber pacemaker, and you can have a multi-chamber pacemaker, what is called as a biventricular pacemaker, or also cardiac resynchronization therapy. So this is actually, as I showed you, there is a vein here which goes to the superior vena cava, the left subclavian, and this is what we puncture, and then we take this lead, thread it, and then it reaches the right ventricular apex, and the pulse generator is implanted under the skin in a very simple, small surgery that we do. But a dual chamber pacemaker will have 2 leads. You can see 2 leads here. One lead is in the atrium, the other lead is in the ventricle. So the atrioventricular synchrony, as we would say, is maintained. So look at the amount of technology development that has happened in the last 60 odd years, 70 years, that we have reached a stage where we can chamber pace both. And now there are these triple lead pacemakers, which are called as CRT, cardiac resynchronization devices. And you pace the atrium and the left ventricle and the right ventricle, so that both the ventricles are contracting simultaneously, so that they do not dilate over a period of time. This is the intricate electrical circuitry, which essentially has the battery power, and it has the voltage, the current reference generators. It monitors and measures the current. High voltage multipliers are there. And so the pulse generator has its own battery which lasts. Normally the batteries that we use today are lithium iodide batteries. They last for a period of 8 to 10 years. And after 10 years, we have to change the pulse generator. In between, nuclear powered pacemakers came a couple of decades back, but there were radiation hazards with those, although they lasted for longer time, but because of the radiation hazards actually. So this is one area which is a research area actually, how to empower this small pacemaker so that its battery lasts for longer. There are some pacemakers now which last for 12 to 13 years also, but that's about all. The other part is, as I said, very intricate sensors, and there is a telemetry circuit because of which we can virtually program everything in a pacemaker. At what rate we want to pace, whether if we want the right ventricle to pace first or the left ventricle to pace first, how much time interval we need to give. By interrogation of a pacemaker from outside, where there is a telemetry function, so patient comes to us normally after 3 to 4 months, and we can see what rhythm abnormalities during those 3 months patient had. So they virtually act as telemetries because they have these sensing functions. So there is a very intricate sensing, telemetry, and the information system which lies in these pacemakers, because of which they have become very, very advanced. It is because of this circuitry, and as I said, there is this battery, and it is the circuitry which controls the whole functions of sensing, programming that we do from outside. Uh, so as just to remind you, the pulse generator is, this is the pulse generator. Normally, pulse generators are now about, I mean, you can say half the size of the fist of the hand, and they are implanted here. The ICDs, which I'll talk to you about later, they are actually more bigger yet because they have to give more energy. They're generally lithium iodide. And as I said, these 1, 2, or 3 leads are put, which has, of course, you would know better, and a node and a cathode which is at the tip and which gives the, so this lead is insulated, it is very soft, it has to be insulated so that it doesn't discharge on the way. And the electrical circuit is actually, now this is a bipolar pacemaker in which the negative and the positive are next to each other. Sometimes we use the cathode here and the anode is the pacemaker itself. Then the pulse generator stimulus artifact is actually bigger. So as I said, it could be transvenous, it could be epicardial, and of course you can use the esophagus is the structure behind the heart. You can use that because of its proximity, that can also be used. But most commonly we use the transvenous route only. And as I said, the chamber which is paced, it's a 5-digit description what we use. Normally you can have a VVI pacemaker or you can have a DDD pacemaker. What will be a VVI pacemaker? Single, it paces the ventricle, senses the ventricle, and gets inhibited when patient's own rhythm comes. Then there are a lot of new functions. Rate modulation has come in the pacemakers. Multi-set, as I said, it can pace atrium, ventricle. Dual chamber is when it senses both, paces both. So obviously dual chamber pacemakers are better than. So it is this 5-digit code which will tell you what kind of a pacemaker the patient has. And as I said, pacemakers are essentially used only for brady arrhythmias, for rate, when the rate drops in a given individual. So this is an example, a chest X-ray of a patient who, this is the size of the pulse generator you can make out. It's not pretty big. This is a single wire going. And sometimes we pace the atrium, we don't pace the ventricle. When there is, as I showed you, the sinus node is abnormal. And you can see this is the cathode and the anode, this is the 2 poles. But this is rarely done. Mostly we pace the ventricle only. And this is the dual chamber. You can see 2 leads are coming. They are connected to the pulse generator. So this is an X-ray of a dual chamber pacemaker where a right atrium and a right ventricle has been paced, and they both act in synchrony. This is a triple chamber, triple lead pacemaker, which has an atrial lead, it has a ventricular lead, and it has a coronary sinus. The coronary sinus is the one which drains the venous drainage of the heart. And the coronary sinus lead is there, which we put there, and then it goes behind the left ventricle. So it stimulates the RV and the LV, the right ventricle and the left ventricle. And that is how the ECG now would look like. This is a stimulus artifact which is there. And from this, actually, we can all pick up, doctors can pick up actually whether it is pacing the ventricle or whether it is pacing the atrium and what kind of rhythm is. Here what is happening is the atrium is being sensed. You can see the P wave, and the ventricle is being paced. Because why I'm saying is there is this spike, and spike is the stimulus artifact. So from the ECG you can see, and then you can program. Here you can see the atrium is being paced and the ventricle is just following. Compare it with the last one. The spike is at the ventricular complex. Here the spike is at the atrium before the A wave. So we know actually when this is an atrial pacing and this is a ventricular pacing. Now sometimes pacemakers can fail. They, after all, they are man-made. If God-made things can fail, even man-made fail 1,000 times more often. So there are multiple problems that happen. Pacemakers can oversense, they can undersense. It's a whole lot of technology in which biomedical engineers, the electrical engineers are better off than us, but we can actually judge from the ECG. What you see here is actually the stimulus artifact has come, but it is not pacing, and there is a pause following that when the P waves are there, but the QRS complexes are not there. Whereas here you can see there is a P wave, there is a stimulus artifact for the atrium as well as for the ventricle. So there is a dual pacing happening. But over here, the atrial pacing did not result into a ventricular pacing, and so there is a pause. So this patient, I'm sure, would have come with a syncope, unconsciousness, and that's how. So just to remind this, it was in 1950s that these AC powered pacemakers came, but they were external. There was a cord which was external, and Dr. Furman actually started all. Then Lilly, a very big name in cardiac surgery, actually designed these wearable pacemakers because they were warm. This is something like what an Elved looks like today, because some of the Elveds have to be, the battery is big and it has to be carried. And so I'm sure that will also get miniaturized over a period of time. And then in 58, as I showed you, Senning actually first implanted the fully implantable pacemaker. But till 2015, this is the pacemaker with, of course, multiple programming capabilities that we did. But then it did need a lead, as I showed you, and the pulse generator is placed subcutaneously under the clavicle. In the last couple of years, we now have actually the latest advancement which is there, which is actually a leadless pacemaker. So a pacemaker is implanted actually, but they are only single chamber till now, and we call them as Micra devices. Medtronic, St. Jude's, Boston Scientific are the three companies which actually world over, even in India, there were some pacemakers which were actually designed by Mr. Abdul Kalam and Sri Chitra Institute in Trivandrum. Those pacemakers were the Chitra pacemakers, they were called, but they were used for a short while. We still use actually pacemakers, which are all of us, which are produced by Medtronic, St. Jude's, and Boston Scientific. And these are leadless pacemakers, you can see, and the entire device is placed within it's a small device. Future will, of course, be that we have batteryless devices which can use the cardiac motion itself to empower themselves. And so we will not have to change the pulse generators, as I said. So this much about pacemakers. Any questions? You're welcome at this stage. I'll just spend 5-10 minutes on the other kind of device that we implant with the pacemaker. Now this you see, if you compare this ECG, the lead 1, 2, 3, R, L, F, B1, this is a fast rate and it's a wide QRS. This QRS is so wide. If you compare it with this, say this ECG, normal looking, see how this looks. The QRS is narrow and there is a gap and you can calculate the heart rate. But if we come to this particular ECG now, you can see there is a ventricular contraction or ventricular depolarization, which is at a very fast rate, maybe 120 or so. It's 5 at 2, 7, and 8. So 1500 divided by 8, you can calculate the rate at which this ventricular tachycardia is happening. Since it has the same morphology, we call it monomorphic VT. If it has a twisting morphology like in this, it's changing its shape, we call it polymorphous ventricular tachycardia. Now, ventricular tachycardias are fast heart rhythms. They occur in patients with heart attacks, with heart muscle disease, and they take away patients within minutes, actually, if the ventricular tachycardia, because they degenerate into ventricular fibrillation. And so ventricular tachycardias need as urgent treatment as bradyarrhythmias. And the devices you must have seen, the airports, and in fact, in Seattle, every third person in that city knows how to use an external defibrillator. You must have seen these at the airports. And the general public has to be taught actually how to use AEDs, because if a cardiac, see, whenever someone drops dead and you drops down, you have to first feel for the pulse. If the pulse is intact, it means person could be having seizure, could be having other syncope. No need to panic. If the carotid pulse is not there, femoral pulse is not there, it means this person has a cardiac arrest, a proper cardiac arrest, and this person is not going to survive unless a DC shock is given. And that's why many lives actually in the Western world and now also in India, there are survivors of cardiac arrest where a bystander has actually given resuscitation, what we call as cardiopulmonary resuscitation to a patient with the use of an external defibrillator. And this is how they look like. You will definitely see them pasted on the walls of airports, and hopefully they will come up at the wherever there are crowding malls, and it's mandatory now that very crowded places should have, and many lives have been saved by by the lay people with the use of external defibrillators. This is what actually a defibrillator. We in our hospital have the Philips ones, but as I said, there are Zoll defibrillators. There are many companies which produce defibrillators. This is how a defibrillator looks like in a hospital. These are the pads which we place on the chest wall, and you must have seen in the movies also, they give a shock. And this is the sternum. You can see here sternum rhythm, and this is by the side. And this is the amount of energy, the current that we choose to give. And then there are 3 steps. We charge it first, place the pads on the chest wall, and then we press it and give an electrical shock. If it is a ventricular fibrillation, we give a non-synchronized shock. If it is a ventricular tachycardia, there is some sort of a rhythm is there, then we give a synchronized shock, which is called as cardioversion. And if it is non-synchronized, it is called as defibrillation. So for a fast rhythm in the hospital setting, these are the devices you will see what are called as the defibrillators, cardioverter defibrillators, which are actually used in the hospital settings. Now, since we realize that these episodes, those who have once, they can have recurrence also. And so these implantable cardioverter defibrillators have come up, which have the capacity to sense a ventricular tachycardia. Initially, they're very intricate devices. Initially, they can do anti-tachycardia, because when you give a shock to a person has, of course, a pain. So sometimes it has psychological effects, but then it saves a life. So initially, it will do anti-tachycardia pacing. It will pace at a rate faster than the VT and then suddenly stop, which sometimes reverts the ventricular tachycardia. But if it doesn't happen, then it doesn't wait for too long. It waits once and then gives a shock. So we can say primary prophylaxis. I think you can skip this. So this is what an ICD also looks like actually, but then it will have these coils because it has to deliver an electrical shock. It continuously keeps sensing as long as the rhythm is sinus is normal, it is sleeping. But the moment VT occurs, it senses, first does an anti-tachycardia pacing. If it doesn't revert the rhythm, then it gives a shock. And this is what an ICD, it is bigger than the pacemaker because it has bigger battery size. And it is these coils which are there, because these coils, the shocking coils actually have to be there, which then deliver as, it's like the coils that we place on the chest wall. And then the current has to go from one coil to the other for the electrical depolarization of the heart to occur, so that the heart rhythm comes back to normal. They can also be actually ICDs, can be single chamber or dual chamber also. And this is actually the most advanced device. It is we call it as a combo device. This costs quite a lot, about 9 lakhs, 8 lakhs or so. But it has the ability to pace all 3 chambers and also has the ability to give a shock. So this is the ultimate device, I would say, that we have. We showed you the single chamber pacemakers, dual chamber, multi-site pacing, defibrillator, single chamber, dual chamber. And now this is the ultimate, which combines everything, all the capabilities. And people with ischemic cardiomyopathy, whose heart's pumping is weak, that is where we use this. And you can see these devices, they are not only sensing slow hearts, they are sensing fast hearts. They have ability to give a shock. They have a continuous ability to pace. So this is what these defibrillators actually look like. This is what we spoke about, the leadless pacemaker, which is implanted directly at the right ventricular apex. And this is now actually leadless defibrillators have also come out. They are implanted surgically and they have these 2 coils, and they can. So we are actually embarking upon areas of going leadless with the pacemakers as well as with the this is an X-ray of this particular patient, and this is an X-ray of what I just showed you actually. The leadless defibrillator, which has 2 coils, the positive and the negative, and this is actually the leadless pacemaker which gets directly implanted in the right ventricle. So there is no lead which you normally see. And these are some of the advancements which have happened over a period of time. There is some electromechanical interference which occurs because these are electrical devices, and any apparatus that emits RF radio frequency waves between 0 to 100 hertz can generate actually electromechanical magnetic interference, and so it can interfere with the proper functioning of the pacemakers. Higher frequency waves like X-rays, infrared, ultraviolet, they do not interfere with the pacemakers. But cardiac MRI, now MRI compatible pacemakers have also come up, and most of the pacemakers today which we are implanting are MRI compatible. MRI can be done because it's a very strong electrical actually magnetic resonance imaging, as the name implies. It is imaging by using the magnetic force. Surgical cauteries, when surgeons have to stop bleeding, they have to use cauteries, so they can interfere, and dental pulp vitality. So all these things can, the lithotripters, radars, all these cellular telephones, they all have interference after all with the pacemaker. It's an external device. There have been multiple adverse effects, and this is an area of actually research that we have. We do use this application. We use magnet actually in the hospital whenever we have to use the cautery, because the cautery will then interfere with the pacemaker. So we place a magnet on the pulse generator, and then it becomes asynchronous, and it keeps on firing irrespective of the electrical. So it will not sense these extraneous impulses that are coming. And so magnet can be used for ICD, it can be used for a pacemaker, whenever we have to do any procedure or patient has to do for this. So I would like to end here by sharing with you that pacemakers have complex electrical activity. They have a battery which lasts for a pretty long time, and they are mainly devices which are used for heart rate abnormalities. Multiple advancements have occurred. Today we can program a pacemaker from outside. I can tell the patient your pacemaker battery life is 6 months, it is 3 years, it is 5 years. If the patient develops atrial fibrillation, I can change the mode of a pacemaker from a DDD mode to a VVI mode. I can select at what rate ICD device will give a shock, whether I want it to fire, I want it to ignore 140 up to 140 heart rate, whether I wanted to fire at that. Everything we can program for from outside, and we can choose in the CRT device which is used for heart failure as to which chamber being stimulated first. So there are a lot of things, sensing capabilities that are there in the pacemakers, which enable us to actually. So I would stop sharing now. And hopefully there will be some questions which we will be very happy to answer if we have answers to that. Otherwise we'll leave it for Dr. Ashish to tell you. But I do hope you didn't find it very boring, very monotonous, or very out of place, because I know application of these devices, the way as a doctor would look at, is very different from the way a biomedical engineer. But unless we have, I am of the strong opinion that unless we have knowledge sharing and interactions, we will never move forward. So I must thank Ashish for arranging this class, and it's always a pleasure actually to meet youngsters. Any questions, any comments rather? Anybody has?
Amazing lecture. Yes, Pallavi, you have a question?
Sir, I'm concerned about the immune response after invading these devices inside the body.
Yeah, that's a brilliant question actually. Immune responses, see, complications I did not talk to you. In fact, whenever you will implant a device, knee replacements happen. There are multiple devices which are implanted into people, and infection is a very important, because whenever you will place a metallic device into a body, so aseptic precautions are very, very important for pacemakers. Immunologically, these pacemakers are inherent. they do not generate, whenever something external comes into a blood circulation, it generates an immune response in the body. But these are immunologically inert substances, so they do not generate any immunological response in the body. So unlike human tissues, like you have a kidney transplantation, you do a liver transplantation, or you do a bone marrow transplantation, there actually human tissues have immunological reactions to them. But these devices are immunologically inert and they do not generate. Certain bacteria can have immunological reactions in the body, what we call as, there are some autoimmune diseases, and there are some diseases in which the bacterial antigen is sensed by the body as self, and so the antibodies which are formed against the bacteria, they also act on the human tissues. So that sort of a problem, immunological reactions, does not happen.
These are titanium leads. What are the leads made up of?
They are insulated leads. Yeah, I think they are titanium only, but they prevent the electrical. And these are the pulse generators are stainless steel pulse generators.
Okay.
Sir,
So these
do
leads,
you
sir,
see
are
that-
implanted on the walls. So because the walls are continuously moving, so do you insert them inside the wall? Why
No,
don't they
actually,
detach?
there are two types of leads. One is they have a screw at the top, and once we have placed the tip of the screw is within the lead, and so we rotate it, and a very miniature screw comes out, which is which then fixes the lead over there. The second type of leads are they have a small tines, what we call, and once you push that, their tines are directed like this. And once you will push the lead, actually the right ventricle is a very trabeculated ventricle. It has a lot of trabeculations within it. So once this lead will go there, and those tines will then get embedded in those trabeculations. So we have both types of leads. Some people like to implant the screw-in, what we call as screw-in leads. Some people like to use the tine leads. I use both. There isn't much to choose between them. Actually, there is a very recent now development which has occurred, in which we are the sinus node conducts impulse to the AV node, and the AV node then divides into the left bundle and the right bundle. Now, the whole problem with pacemakers is you are not pacing at the normal conduction pathway. But now we have actually in our institution also 5-6 pacemakers we have now implanted, and there are some centers in the country which are doing more than us. Is you pace the left bundle itself. You make a you trace the bundle by electrophysiological testing, and then you pace at that very site where the left bundle is, so that the ventricular depolarization occurs in a normal manner. And those are all screw in, because there you are placing it at one particular site and you don't want them to move at all. So the leads can be.
And about the charging, the battery, can't they be charged externally by using those external charging, wireless charging?
That technology does not exist, and I think whichever company will finally come out with an external battery, that will be a remarkable development, because I re-implant a lot of, I started 30 years back. I have a couple of patients where I have implanted pacemakers twice also, because after 10 years, we normally have to do that. In fact, by 8 years or so, we start telling our patients that now keep visiting your pacemaker testing every 6 months, sometimes even every 3 months, because you have to check your battery. And normally it will last for 8 to 12 months, depending upon how much the pacemaker is used. See, some people are using the pacemaker all the time. Some people have normal rhythm in between, they are using intermittently, so that will make a difference. But external recharging of these batteries, technology does not exist.
Yes, any other questions, guys?
Good morning, sir. I want to ask about the undersensing of the pacemakers and how it can be addressed in the ECG wave.
Yeah, that's a brilliant question actually. Sometimes the pacemakers are not sensing the patient's rhythm and they fire, so they are unable to sense. Sometimes they oversense, like they might sense a small, as I said, electromagnetic interference is occurring. So if they are not able to sense the patient's own rhythm, QRS complex, and they fire during the T wave. Now T wave is the repolarization area. And if an impulse is given at that time when the heart is repolarizing, it can generate a ventricular tachycardia also. So what we call as a R on T phenomenon. On the T, there is an R wave coming. So you are right, under sensing and over sensing are both important issues. Pacemakers, which we used to actually implant 10 years back, had lesser programming capabilities. Today, we can virtually change its sensitivity from 2 to 3 millivolts to 4 to 2.5. So we can even, change it depending upon whether it is under sensing or over sensing. But yes, its sensing is one of the major programmable parameters that we, besides telemetry, one of the major things which we are looking at is it able to sense properly the patient's beat? Is it not sensing small undulations like the P? Because if it senses the P wave and does not fire, then patient can have syncope. If it senses couple of P waves, it thinks that it is a R wave and does not fire, then the whole purpose of a pacemaker is lost. Or the other side, as I explained to you, if it is not sensing at all, then it will fire right after the patient's own beat. So both ways it is risky, and both ways we can externally actually adjust it.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, what about the failure rate of these ICDs?
There is I would say there are a lot of things that we do in cardiology. The number of lives saved with ICDs is more than the number of lives you save with a coronary artery bypass surgery. Because the ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation is the way ultimately someone dies. 85% of the deaths are due to ventricular fibrillation. 15% of the deaths are due to asystole, when there is an asystole. But mostly it is this occurrence of a vent. And people who have bad hearts, who have weak hearts, who have hearts which have a pumping capacity of 25 to 30% only, they have actually almost half of them will die of a VF, half of them will die of pump failure. So people with LV dysfunction, multiple lives are saved with the implantation of an ICD. The only problem is the cost actually. Cost of an ICD device is about 3.5 lakhs. If they become a little bit cheaper like pacemakers, you will see many more devices being implanted actually. Failure rates are not too many. You can program actually, see some ventricular tachycardias cause hypotension, some don't cause hypotension. Hypotension is low blood pressure. Some people tolerate fast heart rate. So according to the person's disease, we adjust actually, we program these. Failure rates are very low, I would say, when the device has not fired a ventricular tachycardia. If it does not fire it is programmed to give, see, first shock it will give is say 28 joules. Second it will give is 32 joules. Third it will give is 36 joules. So it is programmed by the operator in a way that you can give higher energy shocks subsequently.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes,
Sir, when a person undergoes this kind of implants, what are their physical movement restrictions? Shocks, any mechanical shocks to the body?
See, pacemaker, once it is implanted, person does not sense. It is just, normal impulses coming. Person doesn't, they just forget that they have a pacemaker. And there are no physical restrictions because it's a very small device implanted under the clavicle. And so they virtually, for 10 years, they have a normal longevity, normal living, normal activities. There are no restrictions that we put on them. But for a little bit that they should avoid actually going very close to these high-powered these electrical stations. Otherwise, there are very few restrictions that we electric blankets and all they have to avoid. Yes, ICD shock is a very traumatic, not a very traumatic, but it is a traumatic experience for the person. And some people lose confidence because when they get a shock, it is it does hurt them, and a lot of people lose confidence. So psychological therapy has to be given to people. Sometimes they become very delirious, they become very scared, and they come back to us with a lot of problems which are psychological mainly. But then we reassure them that a shock means that that time the person was dying and it saved his life, because that is what it ultimately means. If the pacemaker, if the ICD did not fire when a ventricular tachycardia or a VF is there, the person was going to die. So that is the whole purpose of putting an ICD. But sometimes we have storms, ICD shock storms, when VT keeps on occurring again and again. So there are issues, as you rightly said, there are when multiple shocks happen, that depletes the battery also faster. Just as I said, a pacemaker battery lasts for 10, 11 years. ICD battery normally lasts for 5, 6 years only. We have to change the ICD after 6 years. So there are issues. You are right. There is a shock is not a good experience for a person, and it has psychological traumatic effects. But generally, they are tolerated okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so I think we should let go Professor Wonder. And I thank Dr. Wonder for his amazing lecture. And really, even I learned a lot listening to this. And I hope all the students also learned quite some things. So thank you, sir, for your illuminating lecture.
Always a pleasure to interact with you. Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.